Welcome back to Formula 1 Espresso News. This is the podcast brought to you by Coffee Corner Motorsport, Full Beans the podcast. I'm your host, Terry, and for the next 30 minutes, you're going to be wondering what on earth we're talking about because it has been as dull as ditch water with regards to news during the summer break. However, we're going to be breaking down 2026 driver lineups, what we know so far, and what I'm also predicting. We know that some drivers and teams are locked in. We know that some seats are open. We know that some seats are pretty much there and almost a given. So we're going to be going through all of this. And also I'm going to be telling you who I think is going to be in each team as the teams line up in Australia next year. So quick bit of housekeeping from me. If you can, hit that like, subscribe, follow, whatever button is available to you on the platform you're listening to the podcast on. It helps get the podcast to new people. And it also reminds you when these podcasts drops by giving you a handy notification. Also, as per usual, www.coffeecornermotorsport.com for all of the latest on the website, and Coffee Corner Motorsport on all social media platforms will give you the most up-to-date and speediest news in Formula 1. Well, I hope it does anyway. But let's get into it because we all want to know what's going on with 2026 and driver lineup. So grab your coffee or whatever drinks available to you and let's go. Okay, we're going to start off with what we know. So these are the confirmed driver lineup. This is what we know in terms of drivers who have a signed contract. So not speculation, not what we think. This is who have in front of them a signed driver contract. Starting off, of course, with McLaren. They have Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, both signed, both locked in. No issues there. Ferrari have Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Yes, that's completely right. That announcement at the beginning of August wasn't a retirement announcement. It was just a new flavour of tequila for Lewis Hamilton. So he will be on the grid next year with Ferrari, and that lineup is locked in. Max Verstappen is Red Bull's only driver locked in for 2026 after that confirmation that he's stopping. Aston Martin, of course, have Fernando Alonso and, of course, have Lance Stroll locked in for 2026. Haas have their driver lineup of Esteban Ocon and Oliver Behrman locked in for next year. Williams, of course, have Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz, and Sauber, who will, of course, be transitioned to Audi, have Nico Hülkenberg and Gabriel Bortoleto. Now, in terms of other drivers on the grid, the only person on the grid out of all of those who has a contract for next season is Pierre Gasly with Alpine. So it leaves a lot up for debate. So it leaves a bit of movement, it leaves a bit of speculation, and of course, Cadillac are coming, 11th team on the grid. So let's get into all of this about this partnership. Now, we know that McLaren have the most stable partnership on there. We know that they say they got no number one driver, and we know they're signed into multi-year deals. Do I expect that to change? No, I don't. However, we do have to realise one thing. McLaren will lock out both championships this season, barring a catastrophe in the second half of the season. We know they can wrap up the Constructors' Championship by Baku, and we know that one of their drivers is most likely going to get the Drivers' Championship looking at the current championship. Which one is a massive debate. My money personally is on Oscar. However, Lando is on the hunt and coming into a run of form as well, so it could go either way. But ultimately, there is an issue for McLaren here because you cannot say you have two number one drivers when one of them is a world champion. It doesn't work. And this is where I feel McLaren are going to start becoming undone by whoever wins the championship. And I don't mean that in NASCAR. I don't mean that in there will be an all-out war in McLaren. I think there will be a very big internal struggle with their driver dynamics once one of those drivers secure the championship, because you will not have a world champion in a team wanting to be on equal par with the teammate they've just beaten the previous year to the Formula 1 Drivers' Championship. It does not happen. Drivers' mentality does not allow that to happen, and I imagine a driver's agent wouldn't allow that to happen. It will go down the route of you either make me number one or I'm going to take my contract and go elsewhere. We know that after 2026, there is a lot of driver moves up for debate. This time next year, it is going to be silly season. This one may have been quiet. I imagine the one next year is going to go bonkers when you look at all these driver contracts that are going to be up. And as we know, drivers' contracts have clauses built into them all around, and teams can change their minds as well. So whilst I know that McLaren will start the season with the same driver lineup, whether or not that driver lineup will be as harmonious by the time we get to the end of 2026 or even at the end of this year, that remains a big debate for all to see. But as it stands, one of their drivers will become the de facto number one by default. Whether or not they put it on the car or not, that's obviously up for debate. Max will naturally go back to number 33. That number one will be back up for grabs with whoever wins it. It'd be interesting to see if it does go on there. But it does leave question marks over McLaren going forward in the future. Ferrari, of course, have Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton. Star power is completely off the charts with these two. Yes, there's been a lot of talk about Lewis Hamilton and his dwindling form. Yes, his form hasn't been great. I'm the first to admit that. I've done lots of videos on this one. He needs to improve, especially his qualifying. It's not been good enough. However, in terms of a contract, commerciality, all of these things, he has a contract. Let's talk in Italy. This contract is, in fact, more weighted towards him than what it is to Ferrari. It's up to him if he wants to continue, rather than it's up to Ferrari to end that contract, which makes sense. It took a lot to lure him from Mercedes, so it makes sense that it's heavily weighted. Despite what people think, he is a 7-time world champion, so therefore he carries weight when he negotiates a contract. And Ferrari, of course, saw the commercial benefit of bringing Lewis on board, and naturally Lewis saw the benefit of joining Ferrari, so therefore wanted things weighted his way. Charles Leclerc, as we know, you cut Charles Leclerc and he bleeds Ferrari, doesn't he? So as it stands, that driver lineup is going to go into it. And if Lewis gets a good start to the season, we'll see a different Lewis Hamilton, I feel, in that Ferrari. If he gets a bad start to the season, wow, come 2027, all gloves are off. So Martin, Alonso, he may be approaching, 45? I can't remember exactly. But he's going to have an Adrian Newey car in his hands for the first time in his career, and he's desperate to get his hands on that one in 2026. He's not quitting. He's not going anywhere, at least for the first part of the new regulations. Whether or not he will go after that, there's been a lot of talk that he's going to do an ambassador role, move on there. However, when the flag drops in Australia, you can bet your bottom dollar Fernando Alonso will make sure everything in his power has been done to get in that Adrian Newey car. As for Lance Stroll, wow. I mean, where do we start with this one? And there's a lot of hate on Lance Stroll, rightly or wrongly, whichever way you look at it. You either are a Lance Stroll fan or you're not. The reality is he's got a contract that his dad owns a team, and until that team ownership changes or it's put under pressure by sponsors, engine manufacturers, it's not changing anytime soon. And it looks like the start of 2026, it won't change then. Whether or not that changes later on remains to be seen. Williams have probably got, one of the most stable partnerships in terms of two drivers on even keel. Carlos is obviously now coming back into the frame after what was a difficult start to his Williams career. He's starting to perform. They've got that double driver lineup. I kind of feel that James Vowles has got to provide a car for both his drivers. I think that their ambitions lie a lot higher at the grid. And I think it's fair to say that James Vowles is, talked up 2026 and the changing regulations. So I kind of feel like, it's now or never for James Vowles Williams. If that Williams car isn't up to scratch next year with all of the focus that has been put on with the new regulations, I feel that James Vowles, as elegant as he is and as good as he is, may start feeling a lot of pressure if that Williams is at the back end of the grid come 2026. None of us hope that's the case. However, it's not impossible to overlook that, because if they get it wrong, James is going to be in trouble. Seem very happy with their driver lineup. Esteban Ocon is very much playing the team game. They've obviously got Oliver Behrman on that multi-year deal. We know it's linked in with Ferrari. We're expecting Ollie Behrman to go back to Ferrari once obviously Lewis or Charles goes. Most likely going to be Lewis. We're fully expecting that they will then call on Ollie Behrman to make the step back up. But as it stands, he's with Haas and he's fine. We know that Audi are happy with their driver lineup, that they've made massive strides. Obviously, Hulkenberg's podium in Silverstone is one of the massive highlights of the season. But ultimately, as they transitioned to Audi, a driver lineup was one they didn't want to leave out to pasture, and they've had that lockdown. And Gabriel Bortolesso has looked strong. He's come back really well after, probably out of all the rookies and an easy start to the season. But that wasn't helped by the performance of the Sauber in the car, was it? But as that Sauber's got better and better, Gabriel Bortolesso has got better and better as well. So I think they'd be very happy with that one. Then, of course, we obviously know about Max, as we know. Max to look at it this time next year if that Red Bull isn't performing. So he's got that contract till 2028. I'm fully expecting Max to be shopping around if that Ford Red Bull powertrain engine isn't up to scratch. But as it stands, when the season opens, he's going to be in it. And same with Pierre Gasly. We know that the Mercedes engines come to Alpine. We're going to touch on that one in a bit as well. But ultimately, Pierre's locked in, and that's that one done. So I think, there's not a lot to talk about there. It's the safe side of the grid, but the real drama has got to be in these gaps, because a lot of people are speculating it's all done and dusted for a lot of these drivers, but I think there's still a bit to play for. I think there's still a bit in there. Let's have a look at who fills in the blanks, because even though silly season has been quiet, there's actually still a lot going on here behind the scenes that we haven't quite realised. Now, we're going to come to Red Bull first. So Max Verstappen is locked in. In terms of his partner, the smart money is on Isaac Hadjar being promoted up. That's kind of the given at the moment. We know that Red Bull have got 4 drivers. Yuki Tsunoda is backed by Honda. That Honda money dries out. And yes, Laurent Mekies in charge does add a new dimension to keeping Yuki on. However, without that Honda backing and Ford not very keen to have a driver whose whole career has been associated with Honda in that seat, I'm struggling to see how Yuki fits into it unless he pulls some amazing performances out of the bag for the second half of the season. And I don't see it in that current Red Bull, to be honest. So I think Yuki's in trouble. I think Isaac Hadjar is the most obvious choice to get that one. If you look at then, Visa Cash Out Racing Bulls, that's lumped those two together. You've then got Liam Lawson as the other driver in there, is the most likely prediction, or certainly my prediction. And then you've got Arvid Lindblad being promoted up. This makes sense to me. I do think that Lawson and Hadjar is still a question mark for Red Bull as a team. I think they're still undecided. Lawson's running form has come very quietly. He's gone back into the forefront. He's now only 2 points behind Isaac Hadjar, which shocked me when I did a deep delve into an article over on the website for that one. Shameless plug on that one. But Andy's also heavily backed by Ford as well in terms of New Zealand and the market they want to grow there. And we know that engine manufacturers can perform well. We know that engine manufacturers and teams play politics, as we've seen with Yuki and Honda, don't we? So don't rule out Liam Lawson just yet. However, for me, I still think they'll start with Isaac Hadjar and let Liam be the number one driver in Visa Cash App, which will then allow, obviously, Arvid to be promoted up, which is the most likely destination for Arvid. Very similar to Kimi Antonelli, may not have set the world alight in terms of Formula 2, but has been steady enough to show that actually he can do a good job. And he is being seen as a natural successor for Max. So the sooner you get him in a car, when you've got a junior team, whatever you want to call it, sister team, B team, whatever you want to call Racing Bulls, ultimately that's for Red Bull to decide to do. So I think they do that, just get him in the car and into Formula 1. Yes, Formula 2 is good for learning and for getting experience. However, you can't be being in the car, and they would have seen from Isaac that it's not, if it goes well, then actually it's good for him. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be their driver lineup. That's my prediction for that one. We come on to Mercedes. Mercedes, to me, is a very simple lock-in. Ultimately, you've got, obviously, Kimi Antonelli. I had to complete my blank then. And you've got George Russell. I'm fully expecting Toto, now that Max is committed to Red Bull. Toto is going to come out. Monza seems a good bet with, obviously, the Italian ties with Kimi. I've got this vision of Toto stood there in the Mercedes motorhome, arms around both of them, announcing their new short-term deal, that George was only the ever one for him, that they're not even really going to say they were talking to Max, are they? They're going to say that it was just a matter of time, that George has been a junior driver all the way through. They're proud to support him. They're glad he's there as their number one. There isn't a better number one on the grid, with his arms around both of them, having a photo op. Tag me in that one if that one comes out, because I reckon that's exactly what's going to happen. Monza's my betting for that one. But I think those two will be carried on. We know that Kimi is Mercedes' future. We know that Toto is bigging Kimi up. And we know that Mercedes have learned the hard way how to handle a rookie. And what I mean by that is every driver they've had has been, had seasons under their belts. Even George Russell, when he came back from Williams, they didn't handle him as a rookie. And that's shown, to be honest. They made some mistakes in Imola. They've learned from them. Kimi, as I keep saying, is going to be up and down all season. He has been. He's done exactly what I expected him to do. Flashes of brilliance, flashes of frustration. However, he's young, he's learning. Mercedes know that. They're going to stick with him. And that will be the driver lineup for next year for those two. Brings us on to Cadillac quite nicely. Now, Cadillac is, of course, the big news in terms of what's going on. Lots of speculation that we're about to announce Cadillac drivers. I don't think there's any surprise on what that partnership looks like, which is, of course, Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez. Now, we're hearing that Bottas could get confirmed as early as next week in Zandvoort, and that Sergio Perez is being lined up for Monza. I'm not sure the significance of those venues and where it relates to Cadillac. I was kind of expecting an American track to be the announcement from both, if I'm honest. But there you go. That's where the smart money is on those. I don't think we'll be seeing outside that. I'll be very surprised if we do. I think that's a pretty good looking. Where does it leave Mercedes in terms of a junior driver? They, of course, will just promote Vesti full time and probably do something with another one of their reserves to bring them on board to get more experience. So they've got enough talent in terms of the Mercedes young driver pool for sim runs, that sort of thing. I'm fully expecting that to happen. We know that Toto doesn't like to get in his driver's way when they find a seat with regards to being off the grid. We've seen it with, obviously, Esteban Ocon before now. We've seen him with Mick Schumacher moving to Alpine to do the WEC as well. So, Toto won't stand in Valtteri's way, and I'm predicting it's going to be the driver lineup for Cadillac. which brings us on to probably the biggest question mark on the grid, and the one that's not talked about enough for me, which is, of course, Alpine and that second seat. For me, this is a real domino effect, and here's why. Because it's a bit of a hot mess, right? When you look at what's going on with Alpine, so Alpine are dumping their engine supply and taking on Mercedes engines. So in theory, there's a chain of thought that they will have a really strong package in terms of the engine, and can they get the area to that? They've got an experienced driver in Pierre Gasly, who they're very happy with. Now, that second seat is a real unknown, isn't it? Now, as it stands, I took a lot of hate from the Franco fans on this one, because I put a post on who I thought would be in the seat for next year, and took a massive hit. I'm not afraid to admit it. Some of it was very good banter in terms of people trying to say that he had a multi-year deal and he was locked in. Others took it too far and were quite abusive and a bit relentless on it, which actually upset me. But we'll move on from that, because that's been and gone. But ultimately, it won't stop me talking about it. And that is that Franco hasn't got a race contract for Alpine for next year. So let's strip everything back to what we know about that second seat in Alpine. As it currently stands, Pierre Gasly has a multi-year deal. Franco Colapinto signed from Williams on a multi-year reserve deal. That was what was announced at the time. That is from the official press release from Alpine when he signed. Now, when he got promoted up to the main seat, he was given a 5-race trial, which took him to Silverstone. Naturally, we are well past Silverstone, as we all know. Now, Flavio Briatore came out and said that was rubbish, which is why a lot of people have jumped on me for that comment when I said that on my post. However, that press release came from Alpine. It came from the Alpine newsroom. That is what Alpine themselves said. And ironically, since that press release was released, the official news from Alpine has been nothing. There's been nothing any further to contradict that statement that Franco Colapinto had 5 races in that Alpine seat. Now, we know he's got more because he's had more. We know that there's most likely going to be to the end of the season. However, bar that, we don't know. We know that Alpine aren't 100% happy with Franco's performances. And even the most ardent Franco fan, who's going to probably attack me for even suggesting he's not going to get a seat, you can surely see the logic in this, where he's not performing at a level where he's securing that seat. He sat on 0 points. Now, yes, I know Pierre's got more races, more experience, and there's been situations where Franco's been unlucky and has been noticeably a lot closer to Pierre. I'm not going to deny that. But has he done enough to get a seat? The question is, or the answer is no, because he hasn't got a contract. And ultimately, that's what talks in Formula One. If you haven't got a contract, you haven't got the seat. We can all sit here and go, the telemetry shows him getting closer. We can look at the stats and say, actually, his qualifying performance is a lot closer, but he's been unlucky with a couple of pit stops. All of these are valid arguments, but they don't take away from that basic fundamental fact of, as it stands, he hasn't got a race seat for next year. Will he get one is a big debate. It's my really big question mark, because with Bottas and Checo going to Cadillac, if that opens the door, that could be the best thing for Franco in terms of keeping his seat. I don't mean that disrespectfully at all. What I mean by that is it takes away the options then in terms of who you replace him with. Because where do you go if you drop Franco? You're going into the unknowns then. You're talking your Paul Aarons. You're talking bringing Mick Schumacher back. You're talking potentially going outside the academy, someone like Alex Dern, another F2 driver. All the names mistakenly off the top of my head from F2, which is quite crap considering I do coverage on F2. But as it stands here, the names I've gone completely blank. But in terms of replacements, they're all young, they're rookies. They're all people on there where you go, actually, are they going to be any better than Franco? Or are they just as much of a risk of continuing with Franco, who's actually going to have experience in his camp and obviously great commercial value, which is, as we know, a good thing for Alpine. So I think for me, it's a big unknown. I think if that Cadillac signing goes the way we want it to be, in terms of Bottas and Perez, which makes sense to me in terms of those signing for those, I think that might be the best thing for Franco. I think that will give him another season, or at least half a season, whilst all these people wait on the wayside. You've got Jack Doohan still there, you've got Paul Aarons still there, they'll be waiting their turn. And I think that will allow them to start with Franco, if nothing else, see what that Mercedes engine's doing and give him the benefit of doubt. I feel if Cadillac go with that, that's kind of a good thing for Franco. If that goes by the wayside, it's going to be a complete, free fall. And I don't know where they go with it. So I think that anyone else is a risk in that seat. And with the exception of, do they go for a Filippo Drugovich? Maybe. I can see Yuki going to Aston Martin in the reserve role with that Honda tie-up, and maybe that frees up Van Dorn and frees up Drugovich once and for all to go off and do other things. So does that allow this change in driver lineup that we see, that Drugovich actually can get in there with a bit of backing from the Brazilian backers that he's got? Is that an avenue for Alpine to look into? I think if anyone's got the right commercial backing, that kind of puts them in the frame. But I think in terms of a rookie and in terms of going to someone like Paul Aaron, I'm not too sure that's a smart move for Alpine. So I'm not too sure if that's going to be a step in the right direction for them. And maybe they would just be better almost having some stability and carrying on with Franco in that sense. And the only way you go outside it is if you can get a Bottas or a Checo and get some experience on board to help develop your car with that new Mercedes engine. But as it stands, I think with Cadillac going for that one, I think Franco's got a good chance to start the season off in terms of that. But yeah, let me know your predictions. Let me know who you think is getting those seats. In terms of winners and losers, let's call it as it is. Who's nailed the lineup? Who's boxed themselves in? Winners, you'd have to say, are Williams, McLaren, Audi, Haas. They've got their driver lineup locked in. It's secure. It's safe. Apart from obviously what I talked about with McLaren, I don't see a lot happening. Losers, you'd have to say Alpine. They're completely stuck for options. They've somehow ended up with a real problem at that second seat. Newey snowed about that Honda backing. He's just, his career's going to stall on the back of that one. On the edge, you'd have to go Red Bull, Mercedes, Cadillac. Yes, they are good lineups on paper potentially, but there are a lot of question marks on that one. Should Cadillac go for a rookie alongside one experienced driver? Have they compromised and brought the whole point of having an 11th team in was to give younger drivers opportunity if they go for those two and announce those two as expected? Is that actually a bit of a kick in the face for the rookies? It remains to be seen, but yeah, I really intrigued to know your thoughts on that one. But as it stands, my lineup for 2026 is going to look like this. Norris, Piastri in the McLaren, Leclerc, Hamilton in the Ferrari, Verstappen, Hasjer in the Red Bull, Antonelli and Russell in the Mercedes, Alonso, Stroll in the Aston Martin, but with Yuki tucked in as a reserve, Gasly, and I think they're going to start with Colapinto at the moment, but that one is still a big question mark for me, but that's where I'm going with that one. Obviously, Bear and Ocon. Then I think Racing Bulls are going to go with Liam Lawson and Arvid Lindblad. Williams, as we know, locked in with Albon and Sainz. Sauber, or they're going to be Audi, got to stop calling them that, are going to be Hulkenberg and Bortoletto. And I think Cadillac are going to announce Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez as their two driver lineup for 2026. Let me know your thoughts on that one. Let me know if you've got anything different. Hit me up on the socials, tag me in the post. See if you agree with me or whether you think the drivers are going to go a different way, or are we pretty much in the realms now where we're locked in and that's everything for it. And I think that's pretty much all I've got for this week. In terms of where I'm off to Silverstone Festival this weekend, so stay tuned for some behind the scenes from there. I'm doing some media work with them, so it's great that they're recognising and doing some media accreditation and handing it out. So always thankful for the support from Silverstone for that one. So I'm going to be there most of the weekend. I'm actually going Sunday with Dad. We're going to go and enjoy some of the Silverstone Festival. It's quite nice. It doesn't fall on a race weekend. Normally we have to juggle things. So it's quite nice for that. I will be back as normal on Fancy Formula for all things Fancy Formula 1 over on Fanam. And yeah, I just want to talk about the website. I just want to talk about a couple of things actually before I do go. So I had a message this week and it wasn't meant in a nice way. It was meant in a way where I kind of see where they're coming from. And it was a criticism that the channel's gone very commercialised. I just wanted to address that whilst I'm on the podcast and just talk about that a bit because it kind of hurt, that comment did, if I'm honest, because ultimately this is a hobby. It's something I do. I want it to be more, but it's a hobby. It pays to host this podcast. It pays to go to Silverstone for the weekend, or it costs, I should say, not pays. It costs to do these things and it costs money out of your own pocket. And everything that I can potentially make goes back into that. So it runs at a loss. People who make content will tell you that. There are a couple of deals you get every so often, which, kind of, I don't know what's the word for it, make the blow not as hard. But ultimately, most of the year is run at a massive loss. And when you get opportunities, they're great. But most of the opportunities come to you in the form of an accreditation or an invite. They don't come in the monetary value. And I want to address that because when I started Coffee Call and Motorsport, I want it to be different. I want to bring this fan-based platform, but I want to bring it into the mainstream. You've probably seen what's happening with like football rights and Mark Goldbridge getting Bundesliga rights and stuff like that. And it shows me that there's a real place for fan first media in this modern day that we do things. Ultimately, I'm a guy in a shed who talks Formula One, and look where we are. We're doing podcasts and we're going to events. We've got media accreditation for Formula E. We've got it for IndyCar. We've managed to get Silverstone to agree to media accreditation. So there is clearly an appetite for fan first media in the current market. And I'm a true believer that I think there's a way to do it right. Now, in terms of people I brought on board, yes, there has been a lot of sponsors on board. Yes, it probably looked commercial, but that's also due to the lack of Formula One news. Now, I don't do rumours, I don't do gossip, so it's probably looked a lot more like I've plugged stuff in the meantime. I probably have in a funny sort of way, not intentionally, I must add, and it was a valid point. But ultimately, that's not the point behind it. My point is I don't post a lot of rumour speculation. I like to bring news. So, yes, I've diverted to a few links. Now, in terms of the support, the shed, that's the page that's been set up on the website. Now, that is links and ways you can support Coffee Corner Motorsport. Now, that's not a hard sell. That's just me being honest, that to keep all these things going and to allow me to continue to do them, it needs to be an offset somewhere. It can't just be all one-way traffic. I'm not too proud to admit that. Now, what I've tried to do is partner with people who bring the community something back. That's something I've tried to do. So I've had opportunities to do TikTok shop, to do all sorts of plug a product on my channel, put a link on something, and I've refused a good 95%, and that's just being honest about it, because ultimately I want stuff that ties in with the brand and stuff that ties in with what everybody do. So the partners on that page are on that page for a reason, and the reason they're on that page is because they bring value to the community and they're also relevant. So in terms of support the shed, you've got Castor, who obviously reached out to me and wanted me to be a Formula One influencer. Now, I'm delighted that Castor are on board. That's an affiliate link. So that's an affiliate link and a discount code. Now, the discount code don't work on some stuff. It doesn't tend to work on sales stuff or Formula One stuff. But that affiliate link and that discount code doesn't charge you any extra. It saves you money. And all it does is give me a percentage of that if you use that link. Now, I don't feel that's a hard sell. Yes, there is an occasion where I'm going to be modelling Castle stuff. They send you stuff to model. That's what they do. That's where affiliate links work and influencer links work. But I also like to think that I'm open and honest about that. When I put them up, I mark them as an ad. I mark them as this is a link. It's an affiliate link. If you order off this link, there will be a payment back to Coffee Corner. We've got a coffee supplier. That makes perfect sense. Thank you, Illy. Illy on board, that's again the affiliate link. So again, you've got to be in the market for it. It's not a case of trying to hard sell something. It's like if you happen to be looking and you like coffee like me and you want to buy something and support at the same time at no extra cost yourself, you click the link. Patreon is a supporting shed. The podcast goes out early. If you've got Patreon, it means you don't get adverts and you get it a day early. Again, it's the price of a coffee for the month. That's it. And that's because Buy Me a Coffee, people who support that in the page. Some people like to do that. So that's on there. Official F1 store, F1 Authentics, Booking.com. All of these things are on there because they're affiliate links and they're only valid if you're in the market for something and you're shopping. They charge you no extra and give something back. So it's not me saying, I want you to go to Formula One store. It's just me saying, actually, if you're on Formula One store and you want a way to support Coffee Corner Motorsport and you're buying a shirt anyway, use this link. And instead of giving them all the profit, some of it will come back this way. It's as simple as that. Now, some people like it and they're okay doing that. Some people don't like it. And you know what? That's cool. One thing I've learned in this game is you're never going to please absolutely everybody. And I take on board the comments, but I just want to explain it a bit. I want to explain what it's about. I want to go off and do events. I want to go off and do more races. I want to go off and do these things. But like everything else, these things cost money. And at some point, you need to just be honest and say, I can't continue to just keep funding stuff and not trying to get anything back in there. So if that offends people, I'm sorry. That was never the intention. But I also wanted to explain it. Ultimately, I'm a guy who cares for our children in a shed. And that's what I've tried to do to get partners on board to help me. So, I just wanted to address that and just wanted to be open about that comment. I like being open on the podcast. I like talking about these issues and these things on there. So that's just a bit from me, bit of a downer to end the podcast on, but they are there if you want to support it. And if you don't, it's cool. We're not putting it behind a paywall. We're not saying that this stuff is going to be on a paywall and if you don't pay, you don't get it. Far from it. It's still free. It's still there. It's just if you do want to help out, there's just a way to help out which doesn't give you any extra costs. That is all it is. So thank you for listening to our mini rant on commercialising Coffee Corner Motorsport. And on that note, it's 30 minutes. I'll bid you farewell. don't forget, coffeecornermotorsport.com for all of the latest news. And of course, same on all the channels. And there's that little subscribe, like, follow button, whatever's there. Do us a favour and hit it. And I'll catch you next week.